committee and senator from one of America's energy powerhouses, it has been incredible to witness how transformative the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act have been so far. We are more energy dependent today than we ever have been, and we're producing more energy cleaner than ever before. In 2023, the United States produced a record 38 trillion cubic feet of gas, a record 4.7 billion barrels of crude oil, a record 238 million megawatt hours of solar power, and a record 6.4 gigawatts of new batteries installed on the grid. That's the type of all the above energy production that we need as a country and that we aspire to have. Now, these laws were also crafted with the goal of securing our energy supply chains and using innovation rather than elimination to reduce emissions. I fully believe that when it comes to goals or regulations, if it's not feasible, it's not reasonable. And there are a lot of technologies that had received minimal federal support in the past that could help reduce emissions that could use a boost. A great example is hydrogen, which we heavily invested in through both of those laws. Since we last had Secretary Granholm here, the bipartisan infrastructure laws, hydrogen hubs were announced, which will benefit 16 states, attract more than $40 billion in private investments. West Virginia is proud to be part of the ARCH2 hub, but that impact of these bills for West Virginia and America doesn't stop there. Instead of being left out, as our energy mix evolves, traditional energy communities are going to play a major role in our energy future and investments in new energy manufacturing facilities. This includes brand new projects like Form Energy's Arn Battery Plant and the legacy steel town of Weirton, West Virginia, which is supported by the advanced manufacturing tax credits from the IRA. It also includes upgrades and improvements for existing facilities like Castilian Plant in Ravenswood, which has received $75 million from the IRA and bipartisan infrastructure law to help them decarbonize. And it's not just West Virginia, for example. The IRA has enabled DOE to guarantee a loan for the first ever restart of a nuclear power plant in Palisades Plant in Michigan, which will provide dispatchable and clean power to meet our country's growing energy demand. The IRA has also mandated federal offshore oil and gas leasing to continue, and as a result, we have received the most bids for offshore leases since 2014 and generated more than $600 million in revenues to help reduce our debt. And since America's offshore oil and gas production has among the lowest greenhouse gas emissions in the world, these projects will displace dirty fuels produced elsewhere. These bills create a lot of opportunity, which is why I'm so frustrated about the numerous ways the administration is trying to reinvent them to fit their political agenda and picking winners and losers that the law damned. Last year, we talked a lot about EV tax credits, which had been revamped in law to secure supply chains and very quickly watered down by the administration in an effort to bribe consumers. No sane person can compare the letter of the law and the proposed guidance and see it any other way. And unfortunately, we are already seeing the impact of these deviations from the law. Last week, Treasury announced that they have reimbursed more than $580 million for EV tax credits so far this year, which is well beyond the $451 million CBO projected for all of the year of 2024. But we've talked a lot about how frustrated I am about that and detrimental impact I believe it will have on our national security to have our transportation sector beholden still to China. Let me raise the issue that's happened since the Secretary was here last year. The new unworkable requirements for the hydrogen industry to be eligible for tax credits that were invented out of thin air. These were things we never heard of. Adding on these, which is additionality, hourly matching, and geographic proximity. Requirements could be a death blow to this critical new sector, and you won't find those words in the law anywhere. Where you'll find them is in a letter sent to the administration by the climate groups that want to see hydrogen fail. Meanwhile, the administration is also distorting the rules to give an extra 10% in tax credits to offshore wind projects located in the ocean by making the bogus argument that they are a legacy energy community. I don't think there's any coal communities in the ocean that were supposed to get the extra 10% to try to reinvigorate their economy. So on the one hand, the administration is trying to liberalize the credits for the slick technologies that left-wing activists want. And at the same time, they are trying to limit the credits to technologies they don't like, such as hydrogen, carbon capture, and domestic mining. To make it worse, they are doing all this as proposed rules, and I think we've spoken about proposed rules, so that they can avoid any legal action against them to rectify the situation when they put out the permanent rules. Unless they change course, we're missing a tremendous opportunity to realize the full promise of these bills. I bring this up today because while the implementation of these tax credits is technically being done by Treasury, the Department has been working closely with Treasury and played an important role in developing the guidance. And I implore you to please step in and fix the craziness before it's too late. Now, the tax credits aren't my only concern. The administration has put a political pause on LNG export permitting at a time when U.S. natural gas prices are as cheap as ever, before doing any analysis on whether our growth in exports will actually outpace our reserves or how this will impact our allies abroad and our own economy. I believe that studies must be done to make sure that Americans aren't paying a premium while companies are making a bigger profit by exporting, but making decisions to appease activists without any data to back them up is just not how our government should work. DOE has also tried to rush a transition to efficiency standards that put U.S. manufacturing at risk. But I was very glad to see that DOE backed off its original proposal for distribution transformers and moved to a standard similar to that which I proposed in a bipartisan bill with Senator Brown, Cruz, and others. But of course, we're here today because of the President's budget request of fiscal year 2025. I would be remiss if I did not register my grave concerns about our nation's growing debt and the larger consequences if we don't get our spending in check. The Department of Energy's budget request had a 2.3% increase over the 2024 levels. So I look forward to discussing how to ensure the department has the resources it needs to stay on the forefront of energy innovation and bolster our energy security without spending beyond our limits. Within the request, I was pleased to see funding proposed for several priorities that are important to my state of West Virginia and to a lot of other of our colleagues here on the podium. This includes $385 million for the Weatherization Assistance Program, which I know is important in all of our states, $900 million DOE's Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, a $3 million increase for the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities, and continued support for the National Energy Technology Laboratory, which is NETL, located in Morgantown. These are important because they keep West Virginia on the cutting edge of innovation while ensuring no one is left behind. So, Secretary Granholm, I appreciate you being here today to discuss the issues that are important to all of us. And we may not always see eye to eye, but we have always been friends, and we always will. And I have so much respect for you and the work that you and your department has been always accessible to work with. I look forward to hearing your perspective on these issues. With that, I'm going to turn to our ranking member, my friend, Senator Brasso, for his opening statement.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding the hearing. Secretary Granholm, welcome back to the committee. Looking at America's energy sector, there's some really good news, and there's also plenty of bad news. The good news to me is that in 2023, America pumped a record amount of oil and natural gas. A normal administration would be cheering record production, but not this one. No. Boasting about record production of oil and gas would offend the climate lobby in an election year, so the administration chooses not to take credit for something. And there's another reason that President Biden has kept quiet, because he knows that we're producing a record amount of oil and natural gas despite him, not because of him. The credit belongs to the innovators, the risk takers, the roughnecks in my home state of Wyoming and elsewhere. They're the people who in 2019 made America energy independent for the first time in 70 years. And how did Joe Biden celebrate their achievement? Well, as a candidate, he threatened to throw them out of work. As president, he's killed pipelines, he's canceled lease sales, rescinded existing leases, slow-walked permits, and blocked access to more and more of America's energy resources. Meanwhile, this president has failed to enforce sanctions on Iran and has waived sanctions on Venezuela. This is a disgrace. The reason that we have record production in 2023, nothing to do with Joe Biden. It is because more of our energy is produced on private lands and state lands. There, the producers don't need permission from Washington to drill. In 2005, about 68% of our oil and 62% of our natural gas was produced on private and state lands. Today, those numbers have increased dramatically. It's 75% of our oil and 90% of our natural gas are produced on private and state lands. So while oil production is a record high, we actually should be producing even more. In 2020, the year before Joe Biden took office, the Energy Information Administration predicted that the production would be 14 million barrels a day by 2023. Well, we actually produced 1.1 million barrels a day below that forecast in 2023. When it comes to production of oil and gas on federal lands, we're living on borrowed time. We've been able to maintain output thanks to production on leases that were issued before Joe Biden became president. In fact, the Biden administration has offered the fewest onshore acres for lease of any administration since the end of World War II. The outlook offshore isn't any better. In 2022, the administration canceled 3 lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico and in Alaska. After Congress restored those sales, the administration did all it could to make the leases unattractive to bidders. Then the administration issued a 5-year offshore plan with the lowest number of sales in history. This isn't just incompetence, it's an ideologic effort to choke off American energy production. So what does it all mean? It means that Joe Biden is setting America up for a fall. It means that if we don't reverse the president's policies, it'll be difficult to maintain American oil and natural gas production in the years ahead. But we don't have to wait years to know the effects of President Biden's decisions. American families are feeling the pain right now. This chart shows how much energy prices have increased since Joe Biden has become president, since he's taken office. It shows what had happened 4 years ago between 2017 and 2020, March of 2020, under President Trump. Gasoline prices down, natural gas prices down, home heating oil prices down, electricity prices up only 3%, total energy cost unchanged. January 17, March 2020, under President Trump. In every case, prices are not only worse under Biden, they are significantly worse. Gasoline up 48%, natural gas up 27%, home heating oil up 44%, electricity up 29%, total energy costs up 39% since Joe Biden has come into office. This is a record failure. This is why Joe Biden, for one reason or another, is called the president of high prices. Between energy costs and grocery prices, people of this country are being hurt by this administration and its policies. Joe Biden needs to stop playing politics with our energy security. He needs to stop worrying about what the TikTok climate influencers think, and the ones who apparently are driving the energy policy, according to the New York Times, the reports related to how policies are being made at the White House today. The president and his administration ought to start worrying about how American families are going to pay their bills now, as well as 10 years from now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we're going to turn to Senator Granholm for opening remarks, or Secretary Granholm.
Thank you so much for the
A lot of us
promotion.
probably like to change.
All right. Chairman Manchin and Ranking Member Barrasso and members of the committee, I am honored to be with you again today to discuss President Biden's latest budget request for the Department of Energy. 3 years ago, I joined this administration believing that if America could come together around a national energy strategy, that we could restore manufacturing, that we could create jobs, that we could address the climate change, and we could lead the world in clean energy. And today, we are doing just that. America is back. Thanks to Congress's efforts and the President's vision, we are executing a focused, deliberate strategy that positions us to become energy independent and secure. The strategy positions our businesses to dominate, our workers to compete, and our communities to thrive. And it is already working. Since the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, companies have announced 600 new or expanded clean energy manufacturing plants on American soil. Nearly $200 billion in planned investment for batteries, for electric vehicles, for solar, wind, nuclear, and more. Tens of thousands of jobs being created from Anchorage to Atlanta, from Louisiana to Las Vegas, from Wyoming to Weirton, West Virginia, and everywhere in between, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Sustaining such growth, though, requires us to complement that historic funding with durable long-term investments. So we're grateful for a fiscal '24 year that appropriates more than $50 billion for the department, The President's budget requests for fiscal year 25 will empower us to make even greater progress. Our commercialization tools are giving American businesses the confidence that they need to capitalize on this moment while deepening our energy security. But deepening our energy security is an ongoing project, and we need to fund it year over year. And that's why the budget calls for significant appropriations for our demonstration and deployment programs, including our Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains and our Grid Deployment Office. We're also making sure every community can benefit from reliable, affordable, clean energy and efficiency technologies. DOE does this, for example, through, as the chairman noted, our Weatherization Assistance Program, which Congress granted transformational funding to in the infrastructure law. I've seen personally firsthand how that program changes lives, as well as I've seen the overwhelming need for it. The budget will bring us closer to meeting that need for 40,000 more low-income households. It also dedicates funding for our interagency working group on coal and power plant communities, and I've seen firsthand how that, too, gives communities the gift of rebirth. It instills pride for the workers who defined America's energy past and will help to power our future. It's not just energy workers. It's after decades of disinvestment, we're finally rebuilding our manufacturing base and developing the skilled workforce necessary to power it. We're also planning our future by doubling down on R&D with $8.6 billion requests for basic science research, $3 billion for applied R&D. We'll make sure each new generation of energy technologies is more innovative than the last, from industrial decarbonization solutions to geothermal to fusion. We're also requesting nearly $2 billion for critical and emerging technologies like AI and quantum. Both are key to economic competitiveness and defense, and DOE is uniquely positioned to drive them forward. The budget also includes an historic $25 billion for our National Nuclear Security Administration. Russia's continued war in Ukraine makes nuclear deterrent paramount in our national defense and for the security of our allies. The President's request would give the NNSA the means to deliver and adapt in the face of evolving threats, and it would advance the NNSA's wider priorities around arms control, nonproliferation, counterterrorism, and the safe use of civil nuclear power. So, thanks to the bipartisan assistance we've received from Congress, America is back. We are the envy of the world, but we cannot afford to lose our momentum, and that depends on your continued support. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary. And we're going to go now. My question is going to be deferred to Senator Padilla, who has to go preside.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the consideration, and I will be respectful of the 5-minute limit. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. It's not news to anybody that from coast to coast, extreme weather events driven by the climate crisis have increased both in frequency as well as intensity. And one of the byproducts of these storms is that power outages have become more and more common. And it can be the impact of extreme heat in the summer months, freezing temperatures and ice storms in the winter. Our nation's electric grid is frequently tested. In many cases, it is not able to weather the storm, pun intended. A weak grid disrupts the lives of millions of Americans, and beyond that, really costs the economy billions of dollars by not only impeding emergency services, for example, but temporarily closing schools, businesses, and other locations, and in many cases even causing massive and dangerous wildfires. So this is an issue that I've been working on since I got to the Senate, together with you. Can you discuss how the fiscal year 25 budget supports a resilient grid both at the transmission and the distribution levels?
Yes, thank you so much for this question, because the grid, of course, is the foundational piece of infrastructure for all energy, and it is a grid that was built in many cases decades and decades ago and needs significant upgrading in addition to expansion. That is exactly what we're working on. Thank you for the tools given in the bipartisan infrastructure law for the Grid Resilience Innovation Program, for example, for the tools given in the Loan Program Office to be able to support additional expansion and hardening of the grid. All of that is necessary. Unfortunately, the GRIP program, for example, the competitive solicitations are far oversubscribed. Even though the generosity of Congress to be able to give us $20 billion for that was obviously very needed, but we need so much more going forward. The bottom line is both on the transmission side in getting power from where it's generated to where it's used, and on the distribution side in the local communities, both are critical. On the distribution side, I'm pleased to say that we've been, in part of this budget, requests additional funding for our grid deployment office for microgrids to be able to create that resiliency at the local level in addition to what we're doing on the transmission side. Both very important. Really appreciate the support this Congress has given us.
Thank you, and I'll just plant the seed. Looking forward to working with you and our chairman on reconductoring of transmission infrastructure, both for capacity and efficiency objectives. The one additional question I wanted to make sure to raise today is in regards to geothermal, right? As part of our shift towards cleaner sources of energy, geothermal energy is considered renewable gold. It has the potential to provide 24/7 clean, reliable, and dispatchable power to the grid. And it's vitally important in the face of a changing climate and the extreme weather events that I discussed. Now, scaling these technologies is especially urgent in places where geothermal resources are abundant, like my home state of California. Can you speak to the importance of supporting the full spectrum of technology development for geothermal technologies, everything from early stage R&D to commercialization and upscaling?
Yes, thank you so much for this. Our Geothermal Technologies Office has been working on this for a long time, but we got a big boost with the ability to use tax credits to incentivize the generation of geothermal power. We also have just launched an enhanced geothermal commercial liftoff report, and I meant to say in the last question, we just today are announcing a liftoff report for innovative grid technologies, which include reconductoring and grid-enhancing technologies. But on geothermal, from conception, the best technologies, the best ways of using hydraulic fracturing to be able to get at places we wouldn't otherwise be able to get at, the best strategy from a commercial liftoff point of view, and the best demonstration of geothermal, like with a company called Fervo, which is using skill set and technology from the oil and gas industry to do enhanced geothermal and is very, very promising, to deployment of more traditional geothermal and deployment of geothermal at home. In other words, heat pumps using geothermal. That full spectrum is exactly what the Department of Energy has been working on, and with your continued support, the one big hurdle that exists from our enhanced geothermal liftoff report is the fact that the capital costs of those projects are expensive. And so figuring out a way to support those capital costs are teed up as the next hurdle we can challenge together.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for your consideration, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, Senator. And Senator Barrasso.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Granholm, 2023, U.S. produced record amount crude oil, natural gas. Good thing or a bad thing for the country?
Good thing.
Great. Largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. Good thing or bad thing?
Good thing.
Our allies more or less secure as a result of what we've been able to do.
It's a good thing.
So world demand for liquefied natural gas is expected to increase significantly between now and 2040. Energy needs are up. I mean, they're talking about in the next 5 years, U.S. energy demand may be adding a new California, just in terms of the amount of energy that's going to be needed. The New York Times had a front-page story about that. So are America's interests better served if the world buys LNG from us or from Qatar?
We think that our LNG is produced in a cleaner fashion, and that's why one of the reasons the demand for our LNG is up to 14 billion cubic feet per day that we are exporting currently, including the 48 billion that have been authorized
Same with
and
Russia?
not yet exported.
Yeah. Same with Russia? Better using ours than Russian?
Of course.
Better using ours than Iran. Great. So the Inspector General has included a written statement in the President's budget, and we have a letter to that effect. And the Inspector General explains that the President's budget will substantially inhibit her from performing the duties of her office. She said, we won't be fully funded in the in the office in terms of the things that they need with just the amount of money that you talked about that's going out. Is there a reason you're not willing to fund the Office of Inspector General in the budget?
The Office of Inspector General has gotten the second largest percentage increase in their budget, a 73% increase in her budget to be able to correspond with the increased amount of funding that is going out the door. We support the Inspector General. We meet with her all the time, and she is getting significant increase in funding under the 25 budget.
Even with the President's budget request, the Inspector General is going to still be short about $170 million to deal with the amount of money that the Department of Energy has gotten over this period of time in the legislation that you have outlined this morning.
We support the Inspector General, which is why we've asked for such a large increase in her budget.
Jigger Shaw, the head of the department's loan office, recently stated, "I don't think anyone is really accusing us, except rhetorically, of pushing money out the door quickly." The Inspector General said, "There is no precedent in the department for this level and pace of financing." And she said the department's funds are already moving quickly and internal controls are, quote, untested. So who's right? Mr. Shaw, who says, nope, the Inspector General, who said, going out really fast, and the internal controls are still untested.
We are testing those internal controls thanks to the advice that she has been providing on how to create them. The reason why it seems fast is because literally no loans were set forth in the previous administration. Currently, there are 18 loans that have either closed or provided a conditional commitment, and 205 in the pipeline, which tells you that the Loan Programs Office is doing a terrific job of being open for business. But that said, it does take time to get a loan through, and that's because of the internal controls that LPO is using.
Well, as we've had a previous hearing in this, I could tell you Mr. Shaw is open for business, and I think it's distressing and a terrible situation going on with him right now. Different topic. Last month you testified that it is possible the administration could impose its own ban on imports of Russian uranium. You also said the legislation solidifies the ban more concretely than if just the department has done it. So your preference is for Congress to enact a ban on imports of Russian uranium. Is that correct?
That would be my preference, yes.
So, and I agree with you. And so I think so do the Americans' nuclear fuel suppliers. Another topic, so along with Russian uranium, if the administration does impose its own ban on Russian uranium imports, will you commit to adhere to the same limits and conditions and terms as found in the legislation that the House has already, that's passed the House?
We would abide whatever Congress passes, of course.
Okay, and will you commit to promptly notify this committee if the administration does issue any waivers on the ban?
Of course.
Okay. Additionally, in February, Deputy Secretary Turk defended the department's decision to stop approving LNG exports. He cited a forecast by the International Energy Agency showing a decline in the world's demand for natural gas, but the department's own Energy Information Administration forecasts that the world's demand for natural gas is going to grow significantly. Why did he ignore the department's own forecast for the world demands for natural gas? And do you think it's appropriate to cherry-pick data to justify different policies of the administration, like the ban on natural gas exports?
I can only assume that what he was suggesting is that there's a range of projections regarding the world's use of natural gas, which is one of the reasons why we are doing our own modeling through the National Energy Technology Lab and the Pacific Northwest National Lab while we update our analysis.
Thanks. Oh, well, thank you. And I agree with that assessment because, unfortunately, he chose one that was not the department modeling, and I thought the department modeling was a better response of what actually the needs are going to be. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary, the immediate response to the administration's proposed guidance on the 45V tax credit on hydrogen is clear. If implemented, it's going to jeopardize the viability of the industry before it even gets a chance to get off the ground. All the hubs are in jeopardy, and all of them have basically sent letters requesting a change immediately. Treasury's requirements on additionality, time matching, and regionality are not just workable. They're saying you have to have new dedicated power located directly to support the hydrogen operation, which was never in there. We just want to make sure hydrogen gets a foothold. The industry response includes a letter from all 7 DOE's hydrogen hubs who wrote in February this year that the projects will no longer be economically viable unless the guidance is significantly revised. So only thing I would ask is, do you think or are you involved, or do you think that we should heed the warning of DOE's own 7 hubs that you have been involved, I think, in all 7, basically, of how they've come out and how we heralded these wonderful opportunities and success? Do you have any insight into what you are thinking and what might be changed?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Obviously, we want these hubs to succeed, and we put out, meaning the administration, the Treasury Department, put out specific questions that they were inviting responses for as they finalized the rule. We've gotten over 30,000 responses, and they are working through those responses. But the bottom line is clearly we want the hubs to succeed.
They understand the concerns that the hubs have, and they're all in sync on this, too, not just one. When you have the California hub and the West Virginia hub in sync, you've got a problem. And I hope they understand that. So we're looking forward to those changes so we can get started with our hubs. My next question is that we spent a lot of time in DOE's critical role in our nation's scientific research enterprise for the Endless Frontier Act, which ultimately became law as the CHIPS and Science Act. It's clear the research and facilities at the DOE steers is imperative scientific innovation, national security, economic growth. The current conversation around the future of artificial intelligence, AI, is no different. America must accelerate our efforts to compete and defend against our adversaries like China on AI, and the Department of Energy has a central role. The department and its national labs have the computing resources. We have those in our national labs. Our Majority Leader, Senator Schumer, is pushing for this to go towards the National Science Foundation, which is a duplication in my evaluation. It's just duplicating, and we're not going to get further ahead or as quickly as we need to get ahead if we go back and try to reinvent the wheel again. I don't know what your input on this, but being over the labs, I think you might have some thoughts about this.
I appreciate you anticipating. Yes, I think our national labs are in, obviously, the driver's seat on both the technology. We have the tools. We have the largest exascale computers in the world. We are obviously using AI and in all of the labs. But we also recognize that the National Science Foundation has a role for AI at the level of democratization of AI. Our collaboration with our Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House has been very important. We really appreciate the fact that Congress has identified AI as a priority as well. I'm very concerned both about the bad uses of AI, but hopeful about the good uses of AI, and am concerned about the amount of energy that AI
We're just very much concerned about the money, the limited amounts of money we're going to have. It's going to be tried to be divided up when it has more. Those resources could get better results if we stay with what we already have. That's going to be the question we all have to probably get our heads around. My final one is about our SPRO. Our Strategic Petroleum Reserve contained about 640 million barrels of crude oil, about 290 million barrels. More than 40% was sold from 2021 to 2023. Bringing us to the lowest level in 40 years. The majority of those sales was the administration's 180 million barrel emergency release in 2022, when oil prices were high and gasoline was going to $5. But Congress is also to blame. We ordered over 80 million barrels in sales since 2021 to offset spending in other areas. I'm glad to see DOE has begun refilling the reserve. I'm told there's only enough funding to bring us back to around 400 million. Do you think the 400 million is a large enough reserve? Has DOE done an analysis about the right size of the reserve that we may have to face an emergency? And if it's not enough, what do we need to do to fix that?
Yeah, we are, first of all, we have the largest oil reserve in the world right now. And we are.
Which is less than 400 million, you're still saying?
Yes, 364 million.
Right.
It is less than what it was. And I'm glad you recognize that the responsibility for the drawdowns occurred both, yes, the Biden administration during the war in Ukraine, but also congressional sales. Actually, congressional sales have accounted for about 217 million barrels since the peak. And there's about, and we appreciate Congress's willingness to cancel the 140 million congressionally mandated sales that were teed up. There's about another 100 million more that will be teed up between now and 2023. We can talk about that. But we are buying back, and we want to buy back at a rate that is good for the taxpayers. So we
You're not buying right now to $85 and $90 range.
Up in the past few months we had. because it was below $80.
Okay.
In fact, we were shooting for
That's your
under.
cutoff?
But in the latest round, it came in above, so we canceled that one. But we still have a strategy of continuing to do this at a value for the taxpayers, noting that we sold at $95 per barrel, and we want to buy back at a rate that saves them.
Okay. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, thank you so much for coming to the Pacific Northwest and looking at all the transformation that's underway that our region is helping with and you are leading, and so we very much appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, obviously, about the Hanford budget. We're very pleased that the request is an increase from what we secured last year, so thanks to the administration and Senator Murray and my colleagues for that. We're proud of the work that we need to do to meet the milestones. In a couple of weeks, U.S. Department of Energy and the State Department of Ecology and Environmental Protection will be announcing a conclusion of holistic negotiations to update the consent decree. And you know how important that tri-party agreement is. This is the results of long talks to improve the removal of waste from 177 underground tanks that contain the most dangerous and difficult decades of plutonium. And so, obviously, I want a commitment on the future tank negotiations to make sure that they have milestones. And can you detail how you will roll out the agreement and get comments so that we know that DOE is taking that seriously? I also, sorry to throw a lot at you, but I figure I would just throw it all out and you can help respond. And if we run out of time, we can respond for the record. I do hear concerns about also the transformation of the Tri-Cities past these things. You know, they obviously think and are really a clean energy hub for a lot of deployment, so they want to know what can happen on the transformation of acreage to a broader range of clean energy development. So I understand a vision has been shared with DOE officials, but the current DO plan would not allow for this kind of development. So I want to make sure that we're continuing to think about how the Tri-Cities continues to play this massive leadership role on energy transformation. You answered Senator Manchin's point about the hydrogen hubs. I just want to weigh in because I feel like this is such a critical point to get these 45V credits done correctly. Assuming you agree that the whole point of this is to decarbonize hard-to-decarbonize sectors like maritime and aviation, fertilizer, and things of that nature. So our goal, and my question is, should our goal really be reaching this decarbonization within these sectors? I think some people are thinking that we should go a different route. I mean, it would be like if we said at the very beginning of electric vehicles, you could only charge an electric vehicle from clean energy. And so the whole point is, what is the milestone going to give us for 45V? I'm assuming that we want to try to, by 2050, cut in these sectors, cut the carbon by some significant amount, and that should be the goal of 45V, so you can tell me whether you agree with that. I'm curious on hydrogen, on fusion, whether you think 48C should be applied to hydrogen, fusion, sorry. We're also a hub in this particular area, and want to know whether you think we should be thinking about broadening that. And then on the transmission, to my colleague's point, we will need 56% more transmission by 2040. That's according to you and your estimates. And the Pacific Northwest Power and Conservation Council calculates the region will need 3,500 megawatts of new renewable energy by 2027. So what can you do to help us make sure, since most of our transition comes from BPA, how can you help us make sure transmission gets built? Oh my gosh, I can see them.
Can I just quickly hit them?
I think.
I don't know how.
I think officially I'm chairing at the moment, so
Okay,
yes, go
so,
ahead.
Madam Chair, may I?
Quickly, because my colleagues.
Yes, just very quickly. Hanford, yes, exciting that they're reaching conclusion. Obviously, we'll work with the community and make sure that it's transparent. Clean up to clean energy, which is one of the things you talked about. We've taken an requests for proposals. We've gotten those. We're evaluating them. We're also in the process of transferring about 150, I want to say, acres to the Tri-Cities area for economic development too. So again, continuing to work with them very, very closely. Hydrogen is the Swiss Army knife, as everybody has said, of clean energy. And yes, decarbonization has to be a key component of it in addition to its other uses.
So you think, just on that point, you think in the next few years, if we went for some short-term goal of just driving production of the hydrogen, look, we're a very green source. I mean, that's why I think we won the hub, because we're a green source. But the whole point is to significantly decarbonize the sector. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that overall goal should be part of the calculation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Fusion and 48C, interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and I'd like to have further conversations about it. I know that those decisions have been made by Treasury already in the first round of 48C, and we don't have insight into that since it's tax information and proprietary, so I'm not even sure unless the entities who received the designation raise their hands.
But do you think if we really are on the precipice of a fusion hit, that the manufacturing aspect for the United States and acceleration of this would be a good idea?
Certainly,
Yeah,
of course it
thank
would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely.
Okay.
And on transmission, I just refer again, I wanted to just say, we have got to increase our transmission capacity. Reconductoring is one of the ways to do that. Grid-enhancing technologies like dynamic line reading is another way to do that. We have got to have a full suite of strategies in addition to building new transmission, but making our current transmission stronger, better, and able to have greater capacity is also a key component of it.
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, we've had other energy secretaries, and they've been part of this equation, but you are making the transformation happen. It's not easy, and you're able to articulate how and why it's so critical, so thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, good to see you. I was out in China, and the proprietor, Mr. Carl, sends his regards. In that vein, we had an opportunity to talk further about geothermal, and I have had the chance to talk with you about the McCushion project. It has been kind of reconfigured, if you will, and I don't think that that's the right word, but I do want to have further discussion with you and Deputy Secretary Turk about geothermal and how we really work to remove some of the barriers that I think we see with regards to the promise of geothermal. And I know that there are good intentions, but for some reason, we're not seeing them translate into the opportunities that we need. So that's not a question for you, but more of an ask and just kind of an alert that I would like to follow up, specific with regards to geothermal and the potential there. Water energy, marine hydrokinetic energy. As you know, we've got more than our share of water around us, whether it's in our rivers, the potential for more hydro. I'm not sure why the administration has proposed a 20% cut to the water power program in its FY25 budget request. It looks like you've increased funding for just about every other renewable. And again, you know, we seem to focus a lot on the favored children, wind and solar, but we have such opportunity within our marine energy opportunities. I don't know if you have proposed a target for marine energy deployment, whether we can expect something in this area. What can you tell me that's good and exciting? Because I'm talking to a lot of people that are very, very excited, and they feel like they're just having to do it on their own because they're kind of alone out there in trying to advance any of these technologies.
Okay, are you?
Go ahead.
Okay, one, on the cut, the two main reasons for that cut was that, one, we have funding provided in 23 and 24 for hydropower demonstrations in irrigation modernization and low-impact hydropower. They were already funded, and so they were pulled out because those demonstrations are already ongoing. We could come back and talk about 2026 and whether we need to re-up that again, but we're funded already in 2025. And similarly, for we had a $29 million reduction for the marine energy infrastructure support at the Marine Coastal Research Lab and PAC-WAVE. And again, in 2024, because we got that funding late, 2024 funding provided funds needed for both sites. And so PAC-WAVE is expected to be completed in the summer of 2024, so we didn't need that funding. Bottom line, though, completely agree with you on kinetic hydropower, on all hydropower.
All hydro.
Dams, et cetera. We need to really lean in on this clean baseload power, and a lot of it is that it's expensive. The upfront capital is expensive for people, and that's, figuring out that, because there wasn't a sort of carve-out for that in the bipartisan infrastructure law, totally would be very supportive of that.
But I think you see this looming threat. The average age of a U.S.
Yes.
hydropower production facility in this country right now is 64 years old.
Yes.
And so we've got to modernize, we've got to upgrade, we've got to make these investments, again, in this extraordinary baseload resource. And so how we're going to move forward with that, again, I want us to be leaning in. I want to ask very quickly on critical minerals. You and I have had the conversation about the need for more natural graphite, the opportunity that we have in Alaska with Graphite One, a natural graphite project, identified graphite source, probably the most exciting in the country right now. And we've gotten minimal support from Department of Energy right now, and it hurts to kind of look at some of the support that the administration is giving for imported LNG or imported critical minerals from places like Mozambique to process here in the country. But I want to ask more specific to this, because in January when Secretary Turk was here, I asked him at the time to confirm if DOE funding programs like the LPO only consider non-mine project infrastructure investment and not able to assist domestic extraction projects. And he he was vague on it. He said that DOE is trying to be creative. But we made very, very, very clear in IJA that DOE had the authority to, quote, support mineral production, processing, manufacturing, and recycling activities. And yet what I hear, at least from Graphite One and from others, is that no, the administration actually will not provide such assistance, and that they've said that you have to have a pilot project operating before they're eligible, and at that point, only supporting ore processing and downstream infrastructure, not the mine itself. And so it's contrary, what they're being told is contrary to what we wrote into law. So this is something that I've asked for clarification on. I don't know if you have anything further that you can add. If you can share with me that DOE will support this, then that's good news, and we want to follow up with that.
I would like to come sit with you and Jigar Shah in your office to talk about this. It's my understanding, and again, I don't look under the hood of what LPO is doing while it's in process, but I believe that there may be a mine that is coming through the system. I don't know any further details about that, and I don't know that it's anything in Alaska. But bottom line is, we have to use all these tools to get the supply chain in the United States, and that means the supply chain for extraction, and it means extracting the critical minerals. So whatever we can do to ensure that the tools we have get us to where we need, I agree with you that we should be using them. So I want to talk with LPO and come to see you about what's possible, and also maybe about the follow-up on the Makushin project.
Let's do that. I'll look forward to that. And again, Deputy Secretary Turk was looking into this too. So between the two of you and Jigar,
great.
It would be important information to us, but hopefully we can move out on that. And I also have a lot of questions for the records that I'm going to be submitting.
For sure.
Great interest in BABA. Everybody's talking about BABA in Alaska right now, and whether or not there will be an opportunity for a continuation of the waiver, the tribal waiver that people are really anxious about. So look forward to more discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. On behalf of the chair, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Secretary Granholm, it's great to see you again. I've heard a lot of talk this past week about Yucca Mountain. So just want to set the record straight here, if you would, if you're able to, with some yes or no answers to my questions. Does the department's fiscal year 25 budget include any funding to restart the Yucca Mountain project?
No.
Does the Biden administration have any intention to move forward with nuclear waste storage at the Yucca Mountain site?
No.
And does your administration support consent-based siting?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you please provide an update where we are, DOE's consent-based siting efforts, and what are some of the ways that the fiscal year 25 budget contributes to this initiative?
Yeah, the consent-based siting strategy is in 3 phases. We're in the first phase. The first phase was to fund 12 different consortia of entities that were exploring whether communities would be willing to raise their hands. And so those conversations are happening now. The second phase will be to identify the volunteers, because of course communities that raise their hand, they want to know what's in it for them, what are the benefits, jobs, but also other kinds of benefits. So that will be phase 2, and phase 3 will actually be starting operations. So we're only in phase 1 right now. It's still going to take, as it has in other countries that have done consent-based siting, it takes time. You have to build trust. You have to answer all the questions, so it takes a little bit of time. So in this budget year, I don't think we have funding for consent-based siting because we're in the process of that first phase, but we will come back to you in phase 2 with a funding request.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then let me associate myself with Senator Murkowski. I think she and I are both interested in ensuring that critical minerals that we need, that the United States plays a key role, including that supply chain. And you and I have talked about this. I am so excited about Nevada right now for our battery technologies. You just called us out for critical mineral development, for cleaner transportation. You've been there. Thank you so much for visiting Nevada. It really is truly the center of clean energy economy. One example is the administration's recent designation of a national regional innovation tech hub for critical minerals through the CHIPS and Science Act for the University of Nevada, Reno. We are very excited about that. Secretary, I'd be interested in learning more about DOE's recent announcement of the Metallic project, if you are able to, and the creation of a future critical mineral supply chain research facility. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't have the details on the Metallic project, but I can tell you that we are, because of Nevada's unique position in having such abundance of critical materials and the processing, actually, which has begun, which is, of course, something that we lack in this country, as well as the uses, like batteries, where they end up, right? So you've got the full supply chain happening. So having a research component that is an anchor for the both the early stage research and development, but also the applied aspects of it, are very important, and that is why having it centered in Nevada was critical.
Thank you. I also want to talk about the workforce. We've talked about this. In your written testimony, you specified in the fiscal year 25 budget request calls for about $1.6 billion to support our clean energy workforce projects across the country. I know the bipartisan infrastructure law mandated the creation of the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board at DOE to further develop that skilled workforce. Can you talk about the progress that we've made, if any, on really developing this workforce that we need for
Yeah,
clean
I mean,
energy for
let me just
future?
give you an example. We have announced in partnership with AFL and the UAW a battery workforce initiative, which has, the idea is to create modules that community colleges could then plug in, or that apprenticeships could plug into with all of the components necessary to be able to create a workforce for this whole new industry that we're creating in the United States. And so I'm pleased to say that we have completed that right now. The curricula is finished, and we are now taking it on the road to be able to get community colleges, especially those adjacent to a battery manufacturing factory, to be able to take on. But that's just one example of the kinds of sort of first of all, they have to be place-based. You have to train people for jobs that are there, right? So that then you can take advantage of the apprenticeships and the apprenticeship tax credits associated with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, Secretary. Mr. Chair.
On behalf of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Secretary, thank you so much for all your work and for coming to Colorado. I read in the papers you go to blue states, red states, everywhere, and energy really is the universal connector of this country. So I agree with our friends here that you're doing a great job. The Biden administration has been clear that increasing domestic mining, and this is Senator Cortez Masto was kind of touching on this, that we need more mining and processing and refining to have sufficient raw materials to address the major changes we're going to make in our energy future. I support and am interested in helping to expand DOE's Mine of the Future initiative. And I thought it'd be interesting to, this approach to revolutionize mining technology and make sure we have socially responsible techniques in place. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yes, the Mine of the Future is a way of being able to do extraction in a sustainable way that is it is more laparoscopic, if you will, that you really go in a very small, using a small opening and doing your exploration and extraction without disturbing the ground around you. And so that Mine of the Future notion is something we would love to support and encourage mining companies to take on in partnership with us. We see an opportunity there for pilots. We also, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to those of you who are eager to update the mining law so that we can really embed the notion of sustainability into our practices like our allies have done, like in Canada. For example, there is a way that we can lead on extraction in a sustainable way as a nation, and I applaud your interest in making that happen as well.
Right. Well, we're all in, and just tangential to that, the R&D around the alternative materials and battery chemistries. That research you're pushing full speed on that as well. I really support that.
Yes, we certainly are. I mean, we want to have the full spectrum, soup to nuts. So from responsible extraction to processing. And obviously, all of the battery components, the anode, the cathode, the separator material, the electrolyte, we want all of those components of the supply chain built in the United States. And we're seeing it happen. I mean, this is what's so amazing, is that policy is actually working, and that we're seeing all of these batteries.
Don't sound surprised.
Well, sometimes you wonder, but this is such great news that people should take home and say, look I mean, we have such a low unemployment rate, in part because of the work that has been done here to generate investment in manufacturing across this country. And the battery place is exactly one place. Of the 600 factories that I talked about in my opening statement, 400 are in the EV or battery space, all pockets of America. And that's all of these components. So it's so exciting to see those incentives actually have an impact.
Yeah, it's been gratifying for all of us, I think. You also said that you're obsessed with the geothermal energy.
Yes.
And I have a copy of the Next Generation Geothermal Liftoff Report, and I'm excited. I mean, that is, I think, one of the most, for a dry scientific study, one of the most exhilarating reads you can have right now. And I thought I'd give you a moment just to talk about that, because I think, you begin to read how much more widely accessible it is, and the potential. Pretty close to 15% of the new energy we're going to need, and especially baseload energy. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as we consider the energy demand increases that we're all seeing, right, whether it's from AI or from electrification or from all these new factories coming online, we've got to identify clean baseload solutions. And geothermal is clearly a clean baseload solution, as is hydroelectric, right, as is batteries with renewables. But I think that geothermal is such an untapped source. And the notion of us actually achieving these technology breakthroughs for enhanced geothermal that allows us to extract geothermal, not just where it's super, super hot, but even where it's not super hot, where you can almost get geothermal from in ubiquity across the country. That is an amazing breakthrough in technology, and therefore can really be, help us to achieve the goal which we have of meeting that increased energy supply. The big challenge, I think, Senator, and this is something I'd love to work with you all on, and there seems to be a great interest in geothermal, is this upfront capital cost. Now, some of that can be addressed through, for example, the Loan Program Office, and we're encouraging geothermal companies to go to the Loan Program Office, but some of it could be addressed through additional upfront capital help, support from Congress, and we should talk about that, because obviously the production tax credit is terrific, but we may need a little juice on the capital upfront.
Well, I'm reading that as a commitment to work with our staff to find that $4 or $5 billion to do a demonstration project that could really make a difference, because it is wildly exciting. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. On behalf of the chair, I call on myself. Madam Secretary, you've covered a lot of ground today, and just to refer back to the final question from Senator Hickenlooper, one of the problems with a lot of these energy technologies is high capital cost, but they have extremely low or no operating costs.
Right.
And so that's why we have to develop incentives to get these in place, because then with hydro, it's very close to zero, nuclear, geothermal. In the long run, if we can get over the capital hump, we can really make a difference in people's bills at home. Now, let me turn to another. I take it you agree. You nod.
I agree.
Thank you. Nods don't show on the record. But let me turn to another issue, was transmission, which you've discussed. Transmission in many states now is more expensive than generation. And it's going to get more so because of the enormous build-out of the grid that's necessary for the electrification of the country. You've mentioned several times grid-enhancing technologies, reconductoring, which I'm all in favor of, very much so. The problem is the incentives in the industry or toward building and the cost. It's a rate-based, you understand how that works. So we need to have incentives for doing the cheaper things first, or perhaps even mandates that say you have to demonstrate you've done the grid-enhancing technologies, the dynamic line monitoring, reconductoring, before you build the big new transmission line, which may be obviated by the grid-enhancing technologies. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it requires a different mindset, perhaps a slightly different business model on the part of the utilities who, are understandably conservative. However, you're seeing a lot of utilities.
But their financial incentive is to build. Most, yes.
Right, because they get a return on investment that is that corresponds. What a fantastic thing is, and I encourage you to take a look at the liftoff report that we issued 1 hour ago on innovative grid technologies, because if you just look at what the estimates are of the necessary expansion of the grid between now and 2033, which is, according to NARUC, I think it's about 91 gigawatts. The grid-enhancing technologies and reconductoring can achieve between 20 and 100 gigawatts, and they are at 5% of what the cost is of build-out.
I hope you'll communicate with your friends at FERC, because they just issued an order that did not require the utilities to even study these grid-enhancing technologies before embarking on a transmission project. I disagree with that decision. I don't understand it, but I think that's something we need to continue to press on, because it's not going to happen by us talking about it. There have to be incentives, and it may be shared savings to the utilities if they use these lower cost technologies. Let me change the subject for a minute just to clarify. The pause in the approval of LNG terminals is indeed a pause, is it not? It's not a ban.
Correct.
It's not a stop.
Correct.
And all you're doing is using that time, a matter of months, I understand, to update the data on impacts on domestic prices and environmental impacts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the problem is, I sat in this seat 7 years ago when a representative of the gas industry said exports of LNG will never exceed 9% of production. Well, right now they're at 14% of production. As you testified, they're going to 48. And it just seems to me prudent to understand the implications of that before we approve massive new projects that may end up significantly increasing domestic prices or environmental impacts. Is that the case for the study?
Yes, yes. Prices at home, hugely important on our manufacturers, et cetera. And also, what are the impacts of on our allies overseas?
Our low domestic gas prices are a huge asymmetric advantage around the world.
Yes.
And I'm concerned that we will, in effect, export that advantage by not understanding the implications of going from 48% of production to something approaching 60 or 70% of production. We've got to understand that, and that's what the pause is all about, is it not?
Yes, to do the update.
I appreciate that. Finally, on methane, fossil fuels are going to be part of the transition. Methane is the low-hanging fruit of climate change. I hope that you will be working, we now have space-based assets that can detect methane leaks, to find out how to detect leaks, how to remedy them, how to bring them to the attention of the manufacturer, because this is one of the places where we can really make a significant difference with a relatively low cost.
Yes, in fact, if you talk to the oil and gas industry, they'll say, we can do this, we can button this up. It's the detection that has been slow, but now we do have, as you noted, satellite assets as well as on-the-ground assets to be able to regionally detect where these leaks are happening. It makes sense from a financial point of view, and certainly it makes sense from a climate point of view.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Yep.
for your testimony and your adept answer to our questions. Senator Manchin.
Senator Daines.
Chairman, thank you. Good to have you here, Secretary.
Nice to see you.
It's been 2.5 months since President Biden paused LNG exports in order to study their impacts. We are no closer to knowing when this pause will be lifted or if it ever will be lifted. If DOE follows the facts and looks at previously published reports, this study will come back the same as all the other previous studies. U.S. LNG exports builds jobs, it strengthens the economy, it reduces global emissions. But I fear, and I'm not alone in this fear, I just met with the ambassador from Croatia, that they're just shocked around why the United States would pause LNG exports in the midst of war on the continent of Europe, where Putin has weaponized LNG, weaponized natural gas. But I look no further than the White House website, where the first quote in their press release lauds, and let me quote, this administration's historic efforts to meet the global commitment to phase out fossil fuels. Is LNG a fossil fuel?
Yes, it is.
This is followed by the second quote, which features #StopLNG. So, Secretary Granholm, if this pause is truly about updating studies, then why do the majority of the quotes in the President's own press release say stop LNG and phase out fossil fuels?
I haven't seen those, but I can tell you that this is
I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, we'll make sure you get it. This is right on the White House press release. You work for the President of the United States.
I have not seen that press release or that quote, but I
Okay.
can tell you that it is a pause to update the study because so much has happened since the last time a study was done. We were only exporting 4 BCF of LNG at that time, and now we are exporting 14, with another 12 BCF under construction and 48 total authorized.
Well, as you know,
this pause doesn't affect any of that.
Well, you know, we've been exporting LNG since 2016, and DOE has done numerous studies since then, including one that showed that LNG exports to Europe have the lowest life cycle emissions. So what exactly is DOE looking for that hasn't already been published?
Well, first of all, as Senator King noted, the fact that we would be potentially exporting up to 48 billion cubic feet, when the last study it was just 4, and we use natural gas here at home, we produce about 100 billion cubic feet of natural gas at home. That would mean we would be exporting, if in fact it was all built, and I'm not saying it's all going to be built, half of our production. What does that do for prices at home?
Let me ask this.
Volumes of
When
these
will the study be completed?
around the end of the year.
Around the end of the year. So what information could DOE find during the study that would cause you to deny all future export applications?
We're not in this to deny all future
But the
export.
website, I'd love to have you go see the White House own press release that says, phase out fossil fuels, because I don't believe what you're saying on prima facie. I think there is a ideology here, as clearly articulated in the White House own release, that says phase out fossil fuels, hashtag stop LNG. That doesn't seem to be talking about pricing. That seems to be a radical ideology now to go to zero fossil fuels.
I can tell you what our instructions have been to the national labs who are doing this study is follow the science and the data. And that's all it is. It's look at what the science and the data show, both on prices at home, what the global demand will be in light of all of these countries saying that they're making different pledges, what the demand will be on the part of our allies so that we can ensure that they are well supplied.
As we're watching Russia continue to destroy Ukraine, when our allies are pleading with us for more U.S. LNG, I was
Our
over.
allies are getting their LNG. Can I
was over.
just be super clear about that?
But no, Madam Secretary, with all due respect, the chilling message you send by pausing LNG permits is being heard around the world. I get that.
It is a pause for a study. You don't need to hype it out beyond what it is. It is a pause to get data.
So why couldn't you do the study in parallel here instead of putting a pause on permits? Because time is the essence. We're talking about a couple of permits. The message that's sent, I will just tell you, maybe you're talking to different allies than I'm talking to, but they are wondering what's going on.
I'm sending a different message clearly than others have been sending. The message I'm sending is all of your LNG that you have under long-term contract is going to be all right because you are already exporting and it's already been authorized. We are taking several months to do a study to determine what the impacts are of additional LNG authorizations, both globally and at home.
I respectfully ask you to stop this highly political pause.
It is a
and
scientific
get back
pause,
to the mission of the Department of Energy.
It is a scientific pause.
I don't
gathering the data.
Yeah. Well, I think you are yielding to the radical elements of the left who want to see go back to the White House press that says stop fossil fuels, hashtag stop LNG. That doesn't sound like a pause. That doesn't sound like cost. That sounds like an ideology that wants to keep LNG from ever being shipped anytime. Well, that's a radical ideology. It's out of step with the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And we have Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to briefly refer to what the Secretary was just testifying to, my understanding is that there are already a lot of LNG permits out there, and it's not as though we need to have more, but just to have a pause. And I mean, really, for some people on the right to keep talking about this, you know, a lot of them don't think that global warming is a problem or is a problem either. They think global warming is a myth. So let me get to wildfire risk. It has been over 8 months since Maui experienced the deadliest wildfire in the U.S. in over a century. And this disaster demonstrates the need to invest in upgrades to the electrical grid that improve monitoring, reduce the risk of wildfires, and help restore power. The infrastructure law established the $10.5 billion Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships, GRIP program, to improve the resilience of the power system against growing threats of extreme weather and climate change. You told Senator Padilla that the grid resilience funding Congress provided in the infrastructure law is oversubscribed. What level of demand for grid resilience improvements is DOE seeing, and what is DOE's role in helping lower income areas still have a reliable grid in the face of wildfire and other climate change risks?
We are grateful for the Grid Resilience Innovation Program because it did give us a significant amount to be able to address these needs. But as I mentioned, we could not possibly fund all of the requests out there, and they were good. They're all good requests. I'm hopeful that we can revisit this with, Congress or a future budget year because I think that it is hugely in demand. We're in a second round of GRIP funding. There's a second round of the competition that is occurring, and so it's right now underway. In this second round, we are prioritizing things like grid-enhancing technologies and reconductoring to make sure that we can get the biggest bang for our buck, so that it's not, so that the rate basing of transmission lines is not forced upon ratepayers, that we can really encourage the cheapest form of grid-enhancing technologies. But this is a huge issue, not just in Hawaii, and I know Hawaii won in the first round of GRIP funding for the Lahaina and Maui wildfires the HECO received. More needs to be done, though.
Did it surprise you that that this program would be so oversubscribed?
Well, I wouldn't say it really surprised me, given the size
need.
of the grid and when it was built, because we have such massive needs and such a crickety old grid. So we're going to have to, as a nation, decide that this is a piece of the infrastructure, like the national highways, that we've got to get serious about investing in, and investing in a smart way by prioritizing the things we know we can do that are less expensive, but also building out what we need to do to get power and where it needs to be.
I agree with you. I want to talk about the transitioning to electric vehicles. Hawaii has the second most expensive gasoline prices in the country at $4.74 per gallon. And whenever global oil prices increases, then we see the impact in Hawaii, the cost of gasoline. So one of the reasons I supported the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act was to help people find more American-made affordable electric vehicles to avoid high prices at the gas pump. How is the transition to electrical vehicles going in your view? And do you know if more people are using the EV tax credits now that they are available at the time of the sale?
Yes.
Purchase of car.
Thank you for that question. And Treasury just put out, I think yesterday, an assessment of the uptake, which is very robust at the dealership. Last year, we sold just slightly less than 10% of the fleet of light-duty vehicles were all electric, and if you added hybrid, it would get to about 17%. So there is a great interest because of the price of gas, because people want to see more choices in terms of their transportation. We're excited about that, but we have also got to work continuously on building out the infrastructure necessary to get people comfortable to buy electric vehicles, and that means the electric vehicle charging infrastructure.
I don't want to interrupt you,
Yep.
but my time is. And one of the goals of this administration is to lower costs for our families, and one of the ways we can do that is to encourage them to buy or to use energy-efficient appliances. So before the Iran's attack in Israel, the House was spending a lot of time trying to undo this administration's encouraging of the use of energy-efficient appliances. Can you just explain briefly the benefits that American people will enjoy from the DOE's improved efficiency standards for appliances?
Yeah, DOE has been doing efficiency standards since 1975, over 60 different products. And just give you one example. If you bought a refrigerator in 1975 and you bought one today, your today's refrigerator would cost you half the amount that it did in 1975. It would be 20% larger, and it would use 1/4 of the electricity. Energy efficiency standards save money, and they are certainly helpful in reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And we have Senator Cassidy.
Madam Secretary, I actually thoroughly accept that we need to decrease emissions, but I'm afraid that the administration is so ideologically focused that we're doing otherwise. Tell me, in the analysis of the natural gas export, are we looking at the fact that because we are exporting less natural gas, that other countries are using more coal, and the greenhouse gas footprint of Germany burning more coal is obviously much worse than if they were burning clean U.S. natural gas? Is that end user having to substitute coal for natural gas part of the life cycle analysis?
First, just to clarify, we are not stopping the export of natural gas. So
yes, but you're stopping the permitting, which means it's creating uncertainty, which means that there are contracts that are going elsewhere, if you will.
We have authorized 48 billion cubic feet of natural gas. That is a massive amount. All of that is still going forward if people can get final investment decisions. Currently exporting 14 billion cubic feet, another 12 billion cubic feet that are under construction. None of that is stopped. None of it.
Yes, but let's not be disingenuous. The fact that there is a pause means that this regulatory pause driven by an administration which sometimes does not look at end results means that investment decisions are being changed.
Well,
but my
we
point
have
being,
spoken
but
with
if I
our-
may go to the point.
Yeah.
Is that life cycle analysis looking at the fact that countries may end up using coal instead of natural gas or import natural gas from countries which don't have our same stringent environmental standards?
Yes, fuel switching is definitely part of the analysis.
So it will show, just to be clear, that China will be using more coal and the impact on global greenhouse gas emissions as opposed to substituting U.S. natural gas, or Germany, or whomever.
Fuel switching by any country or by countries will be part of the life cycle analysis.
I have to admit, the fact that that is so obviously and so transparently a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions that we still need to do the study, again, indicates to me that there's another reason to do the study. But that's an editorial comment. We had testimony here about a year ago, and I forget quite from where, but it was around, I think, Oklahoma, Kansas, someplace like that. And they were talking about how the regulations requiring them to go to renewables was endangering their capacity to meet surges, or and you just talk about the rickety old grid. The fact that we have to bring electrons from the panhandle of Texas all the way to Atlanta obviously makes the grid more important. Whereas if somebody's locally producing, the local grid is more easily maintained, doesn't have to be as high wattage, et cetera. And I say that because a statement was just made that the administration is focused on reducing energy costs. Can we hold up that chart? This is actually what has happened since the administration has taken over. This is what the cost of energy has done. This is not holding down energy cost. There is a term used in Europe, energy poverty. I remember reading an article in the New York Times, ideological in the New York Times, about a family in western Massachusetts, in which the church had to pay the utility bills. Now, I say that because I think there has to be a little bit of table setting. A lot of these things which theoretically are going to lower cost, in reality have increased costs for the average American family. Pipeline permitting becoming more difficult, for example, means that it's more difficult to get cheaper burning natural gas, and therefore people's utility bills are going up. I think Senator King and Manchin have discussed that in the past. Any comments on all that?
Yes. Number one, there is no doubt that we are all focused on reducing costs for people, and energy, of course, being a big component of that. Natural gas prices.
By the way, that chart would suggest that it's not being very successful.
Well, that chart also starts in January 2021 in the middle of the pandemic. So let's be clear about what it actually looks like out of pandemic. Nonetheless, it is important to recognize that the price, for example, of natural gas is at very low prices right now. The price of solar, very low. What's causing the increase in energy prices? One contributing factor is the investments in the grid that are necessary, this old grid that gets rate-based among ratepayers. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important for us all in leadership to take a look at how we invest in the national electric grid so that we are not forcing ratepayers to bear that burden.
Now, may I say that also one thing contributing to the high cost is the inability to permit new natural gas lines. And if you can't get adequate amounts of natural gas to a utility, they're going to have to pay more for whatever source they get it from, and that's a major contributor. We can speak of power lines, but local generation is often natural gas, and that has been inhibited. That pipeline development has been inhibited by this administration's policies.
Well, that's not under my jurisdiction, so I don't have data on that, but I know that this administration is interested in lowering costs for people, which is why they've increased the amount of money for LIHEAP, for weatherization, increased the ability for people to buy electric vehicles at the dealership by reducing those costs, increased the ability for people to do insulation in their homes so that they can reduce the cost. All of these things, all driving toward reducing cost of energy. The cost of natural gas is not high. It is the cost of the infrastructure associated with the energy grid that is expensive.
Yes, I yield. Thank you.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Secretary. I want to ask you about the Loan Programs Office. Projects that are financed under the LPO undergo a very extensive scrutiny and due diligence before being approved. Can you just elaborate on the rigor of the approval process? What safeguards are in place that ensure taxpayer funds are protected and administered prudently? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's you know, the Loan Program Office has really shifted its structure, I'll say, since this administration came into being. So the first thing that's important to know is that the Loan Program Office now is not the first dollar in, but the last dollar in to safeguard the taxpayer. And the Loan Program Office does not take risk on technology. They are funding a business model, and they are looking at the risk associated with the market. And so as part of this, there are 7 steps to be able to get a loan.
Basically, because banks won't take the first risk, right?
Right.
They need to see something get proven out in the marketplace, and then they'll come in and build number 3 or 4, but they typically won't build 1 or 2.
Very well said, and I should have said that in that way, but that's exactly what it is. So, we'll first do a recruitment from our business development office. They have a 2-stage application that they have to go through. That application includes a risk assessment of their business strategy, their leadership team, their marketing strategy, their technology strategy. Then there is an approval in a second part, and then it goes to due diligence, and then it goes to a conditional commitment, and then it goes to, before it goes to a conditional commitment, it goes to the interagency for review, Treasury, it goes to management and budget, comes back, there's a conditional commitment, there's a financial close, and then there is monitoring. So there's all sorts of steps that
And
protect
in
the
those
taxpayer.
steps, are political appointees involved, or is that being done by professional
No,
staff?
those are all, other than the recruiting, which Jigar does, it is all done by professional federal employees.
I want to ask you about industrial decarbonization. We saw some pretty incredible announcements adding up to $6 billion in that sector. I think we're at a place now where we very much understand how to decarbonize the grid. We understand how to decarbonize transportation, which is now the leading source of pollution. The big thing that we need to make progress on is industrial decarbonization. It's cement, it's steel, it's aluminum. Talk about some of the progress that is being made there and what you're excited about within the industrial decarbonization bucket.
Yeah, this is such a great story because there, again, has not been a decision on the part of the federal government to really invest in the technologies that decarbonize the hardest to decarbonize sectors. So the funding that has gone out under the Industrial Decarbonization Program went to all range of technologies, including cement to help make green cement, steel to help make green steel, to glass, all these glass providers, glass producers. And it is, the decarbonization component of things is really a partnership with industry because they want to decarbonize as well. It saves them dollars. So we're very excited about the projects that we announced, and we will have another phase of this, but super excited to get the enthusiasm that we saw from across the country in these projects that otherwise seem to, they don't get as much attention, I think, as some of the other kinds of technologies, but these technologies are hugely important.
Yeah, it's a shame because I think your recent announcements are probably the biggest thing to happen in this sector ever.
Yeah.
And, I don't think we were quite ripe when we did the Inflation Reduction Act for as much focus in this sector as we probably should have put in that legislation. But now it is definitely moving quickly. I want to ask you one last question with my remaining time. Talk to me about the home efficiency rebates and home electrification appliance rebates. What's the time frame for getting those approved? I know my state was the first state to apply for both the home efficiency rebates and the home electrification and appliance rebates. How's that coming along?
Thanks for your leadership on this, by the way, because I know part of this was your baby. And these states are very excited about it. There are 16 states in the pipeline. All these states have the opportunity and all have received sort of preliminary funding to be able to build their program. New Mexico raised their hand right away and said, we want to lean in and be among the first states, which is terrific. Once they're approved and they were submitted, they go through a whole series of steps, but they end up going to, each program goes to NREL at their Golden Field office to be able to get the final thumbs up. Once that happens, all the funding goes to the states. And so for them to build their program. We are hoping that we can convince states to accelerate their strategies so that we have the summer of rebates, if you will, to be able to see people get these appliances in their hands. But it's up to the states. It's up to the state timeline. Some states have leaned in and some states have not, but we want to encourage all to lean in because it's all about the citizens.
So just bearing out that there are a number of steps those states are going to have to take, potentially these programs could be up and running this summer.
Oh, they could be, sure, if the state were willing to go. Now, they've got to get their stuff in to us. We've got a sample application on the website, so it makes it easy. We have a sort of concierge service working with the states to encourage them to apply. A lot of states are resource scarce. Their energy offices already applying for all these other grants feel very, stretched. So that's why getting that initial money so they can hire up to be able to do the program is very important, and I understand that takes time, but we're eager to encourage those who can to do the summer of rebates.
Chairman, I apologize for going a little bit long.
That was my
Appreciate
fault.
your discretion.
No problem. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, nice to see you again. When you were here last, I talked with you about the fact that more than 130 officials in the Energy Department reported more than 2,700 trades of shares, bonds, and options in companies that ethics officers said was directly related to the agency's work. This is institutionalized corruption. And I asked you point blank, do you own any individual stock? And you told me, no. Let's just look at it. It was not a difficult question. Do you own individual stocks, Madam Secretary? You said no. In fact, you repeated it 3 times to me. No, no, no. Turns out that was false. You did own multiple individual stocks, and you neglected to report it to this committee for months afterwards. Why did you mislead this committee?
Oh, my goodness.
That was exactly my response. So why did
Senator,
you mislead this committee?
I believed that I had sold all individual stocks, and I was incorrect. So I came back.
You just don't
and
know your
told-
portfolio?
Pretty much.
It's a big one, I guess, huh?
No, it's extremely small.
Apparently not. Someone manages it for you?
So I came back as soon as I found out that, in fact, I had not sold all individuals.
Wait. No, that's not true either. Let's just look at the timeline. Let's not, I just remind you, you're under oath. Madam Secretary, you testified you didn't own any individual stocks. You didn't sell the stocks for a whole nother month. And after you sold the stocks, you waited another month before you informed this committee. Why did you mislead us, and what were you hiding? Why did you wait so long? Why did you hide this?
I did not hide it because I brought it forth to the committee when I realized that we had made a mistake.
Really? What explains the delay? Why did you wait for a full month to explain your actions to this committee, your false testimony?
That's less than a month, and I sent a letter explaining what had happened.
May the
that I made a
15th to
mistake
June the 9th. Are we
because
going
I
to?
owned a Ford stock that was...
You misled this committee, and you wait. What were the stocks? What were the stocks that you owned?
It was a Ford stock that my husband had owned since he was very young, and I just was not aware of it.
And what were the others? You sold 6 stocks. What were the other 5?
I sold non-conflicting stocks.
What were they?
Honestly, I don't even know. I do know the Ford one because that was a conflict.
You don't.
That's why I raised this.
You're here before this committee a year later after actively misleading to us, after denying and delaying, and now you won't tell us. Was one of them Proterra?
No.
You sat on the board of directors at Proterra. You made millions, CNN reports, and stock options at Proterra. Then you promoted Proterra stock and Proterra products as energy secretary.
Sir.
Was that one of the stocks that you sold?
This is so I mean, really.
Was that one of the stocks
Really?
that you sold? Yes,
No,
really.
no,
You
it
are
was-
presiding over institutionalized corruption in your energy department. You have
so sorry
violated
that-
the Stock Act 9 separate times. You have been referred by the Inspector General for violations of the Hatch Act. It is institutionalized corruption that you are now the face of. And here's what I'm trying to figure out. I just want to know who really runs the energy department. Is it you, or is it the mega corporations whose stock that you own that you're making profits in?
Oh, my goodness.
Or maybe it's the foreign billionaires who fund your conferences. Let's try something else. Do you know the names of the foreign billionaires who fund the conferences you go to? Since you don't know the stocks, do you know the names of the foreign billionaires?
This is unbelievable to me.
Let me help you.
Mr. Chairman.
One of them
be
is
accused like
Hans-Georg
this.
Weiss, a Swiss billionaire who has used various dark money front
I do
groups
not know what you
to
are
funnel
talking about.
various dark money front groups to funnel foreign money into American politics. He has used the Burger Action Fund, $20 million, that then sent money to the Fund for a Better Future, that then sent money to the Climate Power Group that has funded conferences you've attended. Do you know who this is? Do you think it's a
no
good idea
who
to
that
attend
is.
conferences
I have no
funded
idea
by
what you're
foreign
talking
billionaires?
about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't know the stocks, you don't know the billionaires, you would take no responsibility.
One Ford stock.
Meanwhile, your energy department, executives in your energy department are trading stocks in companies that they have direct oversight over, and you were too.
That is incorrect.
It's a
Nobody
fact.
in the Department of Energy, and we have a strong ethics office, does not trade stocks in anything that they have oversight over.
That is
People may
that
own
is simply
individual
not
stocks.
true, Madam Secretary.
Sir,
the Wall
this
Street
is-
Journal has reported on this
Senator, if I may-
extensively.
Wall Street
If I may,
Journal.
Senator, if I may just ask the question, is it possible that maybe we can continue this at a later time, but if you had any questions on the direct energy policies?
Mr. Chairman, this is directly relevant to institutionalized corruption in the Department of Energy that she oversees. You're, I think, about to say that the Wall Street Journal report's wrong.
The Wall Street Journal report did not say that people over whom they were in areas where they were directly overseeing had stocks. They did not. Our ethics office consults with all of our employees that need to be that have a reporting requirement about their stock holdings. They do not own stocks in areas that they have any influence over, nor do I.
Madam Secretary, all I have to say is this record is just deplorable. It is despicable. It is outrageous that hundreds of officers in the Energy Department are trading shares. It is
Incorrect.
outrageous that you misled
Incorrect.
us. It is outrageous
Incorrect.
that you
That
are
is
continuing to
incorrect.
mislead us, and it is outrageous you're going to conferences and events funded by foreign billionaires using dark money to try to influence our politics. This has got to change, and frankly, you should go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lee.
Secretary Granholm, demand for electricity is soaring. It's skyrocketing, in fact. This is happening for a number of reasons, including due to the emergence of AI, of data centers, semiconductor reshoring, clean tech manufacturing, and of course, electric vehicle use. A recent New York Times report addressed this issue and estimated that electricity demand from data centers alone, without taking into account any of those other factors, is going to triple by 2030, just in the next 6 years, using as much power as 40 million homes. Now, NERC has sounded the alarm, and NERC sounded that alarm by regarding this pending reliability crisis that's coming, due specifically to the lack of electricity supply. Demand is soaring, and it's soaring at the same time when the premature retirement of coal-fired power generation units is happening, and it's happening without replacement dispatchable generation capabilities. And so these factors have led to an over-reliance on sources like wind and solar, sources that, while clean, are entirely weather-dependent and can't give us a source of base load energy supply. Grid-scale battery technology is often touted as the answer to this, but of course grid-scale battery technology is nowhere close to being ready for deployment and use. So, Madam Secretary, do you dispute NERC's findings on this? Or is it true that we have a reliability crisis looming?
We certainly have a looming demand for energy crisis, and NERC, I think, put 91 gigawatts to that by 2033 that we would have to add to account for the increase in demand.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, I'd like to get a yes or no answer out of this one, if you can. Yes or no, does the Biden administration support a transition to net zero?
Yes.
Okay. Now, look, the basic laws of supply and demand tell us that if we don't get our act together, we'll see rolling blackouts across the country. And yet you continue to advocate for a transition, even a rapid transition, to net zero. According to a report compiled by McKinsey & Company in 2022, quote, global spending on physical assets on the course to net zero would need to reach about $275 trillion by 2050, or $9.2 trillion per year on average. Now, this factor, of course, doesn't consider the economic ripple effects that would stem from more expensive energy and energy being made less reliable. And one also has to consider the impact of lost jobs related to those same factors. It's fair to say that a net zero transition is going to require enormous sacrifice by American families, with low-income households being hit the hardest. This is deeply concerning to every American. It ought to be concerning to Americans of every background, of every political stripe. But more than anything, this isn't so much about left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, as it is rich versus poor. Rich folks can handle significant increases in the price of energy. Poor folks can't, especially when they find that increases in the price of energy spill over into literally everything they buy, into everything that they do. And when you're living at the margins like that, you're not going to be able to handle that. So, Madam Secretary, if the United States, consistent with your ambitions, with your plans, with the ambitions of the Biden administration, if it completely transitions over to get to net zero, exactly how many degrees will global temperatures decrease as a result of moving to net zero?
Well, we want to keep global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 to 2 degrees. The net zero is by 2050, so there is time to be able to get there. If we see temperatures rising greater than that, of course, the costs for poor people and for people overall because of these extreme weather events will be catastrophic.
Okay, but let's get back to my question. If we get to net zero, when we get to net zero, should we get there at some point? If we get there, what impact will that have on global temperatures?
As I say, the striving to net zero is to prevent the temperatures from rising more than 1.5 to 2 degrees.
Yeah, it's still not the answer to the question. The question is, what impact is that going to have? We've just talked about the fact that it's going to cost $275 trillion to get there. And we've talked about the fact that it's going to cost the global economy, $9 or $10 trillion a year in order to get there. So what does that buy us? What does that do? Now, you're saying, yes, we're trying to not have temperatures increase more than the defined amount that you just described. But what impact does this have? What does it do for global temperatures if we get to net zero?
Perhaps I'm not understanding your question. I think I have answered that. And the whole point is to prevent these extreme and accelerating weather events. We have had year after year of record heat. We've had year after year of increased extreme weather events just in this country.
Look, I understand the Biden administration's affinity for blaming everything, including bad weather, on Republicans and on climate change, which they always associate together. And I fail to understand how you can definitively say that a complete transition to net zero is necessary when you don't even know the impact that it would have on global temperatures. You can't tell me sitting here today what it's going to do. You tell me what you fear might happen if we don't do that. You tell me that you think temperatures will increase less if we do this than if we don't. But I don't get this, especially when, if what you're talking about is, you know, a large number, it would seem fanciful and not backed up. If it's a smaller number, it could be dismissed as a rounding error. And meanwhile, you're talking about completely changing the global economy. And given the way the United States tends to honor its legal obligations and its commitments more than other countries do, we can rest assured that it's going to cost the United States a lot more money than it is going to in a lot of places, meaning poor and middle-class Americans will suffer by far more than anyone and everyone else. I find this completely unacceptable. This is reverse Robin Hood. It's talking about stealing from the rich, stealing from the poor to give to the rich. Nobody supports that. And we can't endure it. America's poor and middle class certainly shouldn't have to shoulder this burden.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. One of the things that, as you know very well from visiting the Energy and Environmental Research Center, is that, you know, we're working very hard to develop these new technologies so that we can keep our baseload energy in place, whether that's our coal-fired electric plants, but also the work that we do in oil and gas. You know, we have the best stewardship in the nation, in the world. Our country has the best stewardship in the world, and it's because we are leading the way in all these technologies, which obviously you saw at the EERC, and DOE needs to help us with that. One of them that we talked to you about is the Plains CO2 Reduction Partnership, PCOR. So we work on that with the EERC at the University of North Dakota. Senator Barrasso works on it in Wyoming with the University of Wyoming. Senator Murkowski in Alaska, the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, as well as our esteemed chairman, Senator Manchin, works with these regional partnerships in West Virginia. So they're very important. They really cover the country. And so we, through the appropriations process, secured funding for those partnerships. There's 4 of them that pretty much cover the whole country. And we directed that Congress move ahead with a multi-year funding to competitively select you know, these partnerships to go ahead and provide, again, this work on how we can safely sequester CO2. And you know, as you know, that's done both for sequestration as well as enhanced oil recovery. So my question is, we need to get going on that. And in the past, there's been disagreement between Congress in terms of funding these things and then the DOE coming in and how they've approached it. And so my question to you is, will you commit to promptly issue a funding opportunity announcement for the RCSP program that's consistent, this is the important part, consistent with the language that we included for 2024? Because we have been doing this for a number of years. These folks, these universities have done a good job across the country, and then DOE came in and tried to, and did change how it's being handled. So we put language in this year to make sure that we move forward with this funding and that it's done as we've done it in the past, which has been very successful.
So the answer is yes. Short answer, I was pleased to see Liberty Carbon Management Hub at the University of North Dakota received from the previous funding opportunity announcement. We are using that same language to go into this next funding opportunity announcement.
Okay, and it's very important. Another project that you're aware of and that we've talked about is Dakota Gasification Company, which takes lignite coal, converts it to natural gas. 50% of the CO2 stream goes for EOR, enhanced oil recovery. And now they're capturing another 35%, which takes it up to 85% for geologic storage. Same thing, though, EERC, University of North Dakota, they measure. So you've got an independent entity measuring to make sure that the CO2 is captured, is put down whole, it's sequestered, and that it's safe for the long term. And, you know, we've put a lot of programs in place in North Dakota. We're one of 2 states in the country that can do it right now, North Dakota and Wyoming. same thing. You're working with them to fund that monitoring project. The first round, I think, was 1.4 million, but now there's additional follow-on funding as this project is ramped up. Again, largest carbon capture project in the country. Again, want to know, will you commit to promptly approving the necessary funding that you participate in with them as a partner in what I think is an incredible, incredible project that's really leading the way forward?
Of course.
Okay. So both of those, I think, incredibly important. The last thing I want to bring up, and I know you've been asked about it, I haven't been here for the whole hearing, but is I was about a year ago in both South Korea and Taiwan. They need LNG from us. We don't want them to be dependent on Russia or somebody else. So again, in terms of this moratorium on siting LNG facilities, it's just paramount that we move forward. And it's not just getting it in place, it's the market signals that we send. You yourself just mentioned the cost of LNG is low now. So we need the facilities to provide it to customers. What can you do to help advance this process so that we get back to permitting LNG facilities?
Yeah, I mean, as we've said, this update process, which is done with our national labs, will be completed around the end of the year, and the data will show what the data shows. But the important part is that it takes into account what our allies need, what we expect the global demand will be, what the impacts on the ground here are in terms of jobs and community, and what the life cycle issue is with respect to LNG. And so all of those, and the cost, of course, very importantly, the cost at home of exporting a large amount of LNG for our own manufacturers, for example, our own consumers of natural gas. So all of that is happening right now, and this will soon be in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, it is really important that we get that squared away, not only for our own national security, but also working with our allies.
But just to remember that everybody who's currently exporting, this does not affect. Everybody who's under construction, this does not affect. Everybody who's authorized, this does not affect.
Yeah, well, we both understand the issue, and your attention to it is very important, and so I thank you for that.
Great.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Granholm, let me just say that you and your husband, Dan, and I have known each other for probably 20 years or more. And Gail and I, we've had a great relationship, and I want to thank you for your service. No one's ever questioned that. And your dedication and commitment to not only the state of Michigan, but to the United States of America. And I appreciate more than you know, and I know that sometimes politics gets a little rough here. And I want to apologize for that. Well, and if you wanted to make any statement whatsoever.
Yeah, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
Thank you for the opportunity that previous statements made by a member of the committee.
You and I talked about this too afterwards, and
Exactly.
we went through all this.
About the transparency of my personal finances. Everything is online. Everything is publicly available. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that.
Let me just say one thing. Living in Michigan, if your husband had not bought Ford stock, he would not be a good Michigander.
Yeah, exactly. Especially since his dad worked for Ford. But anyway.
Anyway, the bottom line is that we know the honorable service you've given and your commitment to this country, and we just want to make sure you're able to continue that in the best way possible. We're here to support. We're here to work out our differences and talk about how we make things better for all. And I think that's the spirit we should be approaching this. But we've got to get back on track, get this politics back on track to where the country comes first. It's not our politics. So I want to thank you again for the witnesses and for you joining us today and bringing your expertise. The members are going to have to the close of business tomorrow, to submit any additional questions for the record. And with that, committee's adjourned.